At 6 a.m., my wife was screaming my name, hysterical. I had changed every lock. Minutes later, her lover arrived with a crowbar. "I'm getting in to take the money." Then a deep voice behind me said, "Step aside, I'll handle this." And the door opened. What they saw next left them shaking. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. The sound hit me like a sledgehammer at exactly 6 in the morning. Charlotte's voice, shrill and desperate, cutting through the January cold like a knife through silence. "Joseph! Joseph, open this damn door! I know you're in there!" I sat on the edge of my bed, still in my pajamas, my hands trembling as I gripped my coffee mug. The ceramic was warm against my palms, but it did nothing to stop the chill that had settled in my bones since December 23rd. That was the day I found the hotel receipts, the day I discovered that my wife of 28 years had been living a double life. The pounding on the front door grew more violent. I could hear her heels clicking frantically on the wooden porch as she paced back and forth. Through the bedroom window I caught glimpses of her platinum blonde hair catching the early morning light. Even in her desperation, Charlotte managed to look put together. She always did. That's what had attracted me to her all those years ago when I was 28 and stupid enough to believe that love could conquer anything. "I have rights, Joseph. This is my house too. You can't just change the locks and pretend I don't exist." Rights. The word made my stomach turn. For 28 years I had given her everything. The house on Maple Street with its rose garden that she insisted on planting. The monthly allowance of $3,500 that she spent on designer clothes and spa treatments. The freedom to redecorate every room twice while I worked 16-hour days building my consulting business from nothing. I walked to the living room window and peered through the curtains. Charlotte was standing directly in front of the door now, her red coat a stark contrast against the white winter morning. Her breath formed small clouds in the frigid air as she continued her assault on my eardrums. "I know you can hear me. Don't you dare ignore me like some common stranger." Common stranger. If only she knew how accurately that described what she had become to me. The woman I had shared a bed with for nearly 3 decades was indeed a stranger. The real Charlotte had finally revealed herself in those hotel receipts, in the credit card statements I had overlooked for months, in the lies that I had been too blind to see. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. A text message from her. "Stop being childish. We need to talk about our finances. There are things you don't understand." Our finances. Another lie wrapped in possessive pronouns. There was no "our" anymore. Not since I discovered that she had been systematically draining our joint account to fund her affair. $50,000. Gone. Just like that. Transferred to accounts I had never seen before, spent on weekends I was told were girls' trips to the spa. The banging intensified, and I could hear her voice breaking with frustration. "Fine, you want to play games? I'll show you games. Derek is coming and he's not as patient as I am." Derek. Even hearing his name made my chest tighten with a mixture of rage and humiliation. Derek Molina, 37 years old, personal trainer at the gym where Charlotte had been working on her health for the past 2 years. I had encouraged her to join. I had even paid the membership fees, proud that my wife was taking care of herself. What a fool I had been. Through the window, I watched as Charlotte pulled out her phone and made a call. Her voice dropped to a whisper, but the cold air carried fragments of her conversation. "Yes, it's me. He changed the locks. No, he won't listen. You need to come now and bring the thing we discussed." The thing we discussed. Ice formed in my veins as I processed the implication. What exactly had they discussed? How far were they willing to go to get what they wanted? I moved away from the window and walked to my home office. The room smelled like leather and old books, a sanctuary I had created over the years. My grandfather's desk sat in the corner, covered with financial documents I had been reviewing obsessively since discovering the truth. Bank statements, investment portfolios, business records, everything I had built, everything I had worked for, laid out like pieces of a puzzle I was desperately trying to solve. The phone rang, Charlotte's number. I let it go to voicemail, but she called again immediately, and again. On the fourth attempt, I answered. "What do you want, Charlotte?" "Oh, so you are alive?" Her voice was saccharine sweet, the tone she used when she wanted something. "Honey, this is ridiculous. Come on, open the door and let's talk like adults." Adults don't steal $75,000 from their spouse's business account. The silence that followed was deafening. For a moment, I thought she might actually confess, might show some semblance of the woman I had fallen in love with decades ago. Instead, she laughed. "Is that what this is about? Joseph, you're being paranoid. That money was for our future, for investments that you would never approve of because you're too conservative, too afraid to take risks." "Investments in hotel rooms with your boyfriend?" Another pause, shorter this time. "Don't be crude. It doesn't suit you." I hung up and immediately blocked her number. The silence that followed was almost worse than her screaming. I could picture her standing on the porch, staring at her phone in disbelief. Charlotte wasn't used to being dismissed. In our marriage, she had always been the one who controlled the narrative, who decided when conversations began and ended. 20 minutes passed before she started yelling again, but this time her tone had shifted. Gone was the false sweetness, the pretense of a loving wife trying to reconcile with her husband. What remained was raw, ugly truth. "You think you're so much better than me, don't you? Sitting in there like some self-righteous victim. But let me tell you something, Joseph Mitchell. You were never enough for me. Not enough excitement, not enough passion, not enough anything." Each word felt like a physical blow. I pressed my back against the office door, sliding down until I was sitting on the hardwood floor. The woman I had cherished, protected, and provided for was systematically destroying every cherished memory we had ever shared. "Derek gives me things you never could. He makes me feel alive. He makes me feel like a woman instead of some forgotten housewife married to a boring businessman." I closed my eyes and tried to block out her voice, but it penetrated every corner of the house. She was shouting now, no longer caring who heard her. "I deserve better than this. I deserve better than you. I've wasted the best years of my life taking care of a man who can't even satisfy his own wife." The cruelty was breathtaking. 28 years of marriage reduced to a litany of complaints and insults. I thought about our wedding day, how radiant she had looked in her white dress, how she had promised to love me in sickness and in health for better or worse. Apparently, worse included discovering what kind of person she really was. A car door slammed outside, followed by heavy footsteps on the gravel driveway. Charlotte's voice immediately brightened. "Thank God you're here. He's lost his mind, Derek. He's locked me out of my own house." A man's voice responded, deeper and rougher than I expected. "Don't worry, baby. I'll handle this." I stood up slowly, my knees creaking in protest. At 56, I felt every year of my age, especially compared to Charlotte's young lover. Through the window, I could see him now, tall, muscular, wearing jeans and a leather jacket. Everything I wasn't. But as I watched Derek stride confidently toward my front door, something shifted inside me. The hurt and betrayal I had been carrying for weeks crystallized into something harder, something more focused. I wasn't the naive young man who had married Charlotte all those years ago. I was 56 years old, I had built a successful business from nothing, and I had survived challenges that would have broken weaker men. Charlotte and her boyfriend had made a serious miscalculation. They thought they were dealing with a victim. They had no idea they were about to meet a man who had finally stopped being afraid of losing what was never really his to begin with. The front door shuddered under what I assumed was Derek's fist. His voice boomed through the wood. "Open up, old man. We need to have a conversation." I walked calmly to the kitchen and poured myself another cup of coffee. Let them pound on the door. Let them scream and threaten and make fools of themselves. I had all the time in the world. After all, I was the only one with the keys. The sound of metal scraping against wood made my blood run cold. Through the kitchen window, I could see Derek walking back to his truck. a massive black pickup that looked like it belonged in a construction zone, not my quiet suburban neighborhood. When he returned, he was carrying something that made my stomach drop. A crowbar. "Joseph, this is your last chance." Charlotte's voice had taken on a hysterical edge. "Derek doesn't like to be kept waiting." I set my coffee cup down with deliberate calm and walked to the front hallway. The morning sunlight streaming through the stained glass panels cast colorful shadows on the hardwood floor, the same floor where Charlotte and I had danced on our 10th anniversary. The memory felt like it belonged to someone else's life. Derek's voice cut through the door like a blade. "Listen up, old man. I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, but it ends now. Charlotte has every right to be in this house, and I'm here to make sure she gets what's coming to her." "What's coming to her?" The phrase made my jaw clench. I pressed my ear against the solid oak door, listening to their conversation on the other side. "How long do you think this will take?" Charlotte asked, and I could hear the nervousness creeping into her voice despite her earlier bravado. "Not long," Derek replied. "These old doors aren't built to keep out someone who really wants in. Besides, what's he gonna do, call the cops and tell them what? That his wife wants to come home?" They both laughed, and the sound was like nails on a chalkboard. These two people were standing on my property, plotting to break into my home, and they found it amusing. "Just be careful with the door," Charlotte said. "We don't want to damage anything unnecessarily. After all, I'll be living here again soon." Living here again soon. The audacity was staggering. Did she really believe that after everything she had done, after every lie and betrayal, she could simply force her way back into my life? The first strike of the crowbar against the doorframe sent vibrations through my entire body. The sound was violent, destructive, and it transformed something fundamental inside me. This wasn't just an attack on my property. It was an assault on everything I had built, everything I had worked for. "That's it, baby," Charlotte encouraged. "A few more hits and we'll be inside." "This door is stronger than I expected," Derek grunted between strikes. "Your husband might be a boring old fool, but he doesn't cheap out on home security." "Trust me," Charlotte replied with venom in her voice. "Joseph is cheap about everything that matters. You should see how little he spends on me. $3,500 a month. Like I'm supposed to live like some suburban housewife on that kind of allowance. $3,500 a month. For allowance. I almost laughed at the absurdity. That was more than most families made in total income, and she spoke about it like poverty wages. Derek's crowbar struck again, this time with more force. I could see the doorframe starting to splinter near the hinges. "Don't worry about money anymore, sweetheart," Derek said, breathing heavily from his efforts. "Once we get inside and you show me where he keeps his important papers, we'll have access to everything. The house, the business, all of it." "He's probably hidden everything," Charlotte replied, and I could hear her pacing on the porch. "Joseph's paranoid about finances. Always has been. But I know where he keeps his safe. I know where he keeps everything that matters. The safe." My blood turned to ice. Charlotte knew the location of my safe because she was my wife, because I had trusted her with my most important possessions. Insurance papers, business documents, my grandfather's war medals, my mother's jewelry, everything I valued was in that safe, everything that represented my family's legacy. "How much do you think he's really worth?" Derek asked, pausing in his assault on my door. Charlotte's laugh was cold and calculating. "More than he'll ever admit. The business alone brings in over $200,000 a year, and that's just what I know about. Plus, he inherited this house from his parents, so there's no mortgage. And the investments." She trailed off, but I could practically hear her mental calculations. "Investments? Joseph's grandfather left him a portfolio that he's been adding to for 30 years. Conservative stuff, but it's probably worth close to $500,000 by now. Maybe more." Derek whistled low. "No wonder you stayed married to him for so long." The casual cruelty of the comment hit me like a physical blow. Charlotte had stayed married to me for my money. All those years when I thought we were building a life together, she was simply enduring my presence while planning her exit strategy. "It wasn't easy," Charlotte continued, her voice growing more animated as she shared her secrets. Do you know how hard it is to pretend to love someone for 28 years? To smile and nod when he talks about his boring business deals, to act grateful when he brings me flowers or plans those stupid romantic dinners? Stupid romantic dinners. I thought about all the anniversaries I had carefully planned, all the surprise weekend getaways, all the small gestures I had made to show her I loved her. In her mind, they had been nothing but burdens to endure. But it was worth it, she continued. Now we can take everything and start fresh. You and me, Derek. We can travel, live somewhere exciting, do all the things I've been dreaming about while I was stuck in this suburban prison. The crowbar struck again, and I heard wood splintering. Derek was making progress, and I estimated he would breach the door within 10 more minutes. I needed to make a decision. I could call the police, but Charlotte was technically still my wife, with legal rights to the property. I could try to reason with them, but they had already made it clear that reason wasn't part of their strategy. "Tell me about the safe," Derek said, breathing hard from his exertion. "It's behind the painting in his office, the one of the lighthouse. It's a stupid sentimental picture from our honeymoon, but he's always been attached to meaningless things like that." Meaningless things. The painting she was referring to showed the lighthouse where we had spent our first night as husband and wife. I had commissioned it as a gift for our 5th anniversary, and Charlotte had smiled when I hung it in my office. Another performance, another lie in a marriage built on deception. "What's the combination?" Charlotte's laugh was triumphant. "His mother's birthday. Joseph's not creative about these things. It's 07/09/1934. I closed my eyes, feeling sick. She was right, the combination was my mother's birthday. I had chosen it because my mother had always liked Charlotte, had welcomed her into our family with open arms. Even on her deathbed, my mother had made me promise to take care of Charlotte, to love her no matter what challenges we might face. If my mother could see this moment, could hear her beloved daughter-in-law betraying every confidence, violating every trust, it would have broken her heart all over again. The crowbar strikes became more rhythmic, more determined. Derek had found his rhythm and the door was beginning to give way. "Once we're inside," Derek said, "I want you to gather up anything valuable that we can carry easily. Jewelry, cash, important documents. We'll come back later with a truck for the bigger stuff." "What about Joseph?" Charlotte asked, and for a moment I wondered if she might show some concern for my welfare. "What about him? He's just one old man. If he tries to cause trouble, I'll handle it." Handle it. The threat was unmistakable. Derek wasn't just planning to rob me. He was prepared to use violence if I resisted. I backed away from the door, my mind racing. These weren't desperate people acting on impulse. This was a calculated crime, planned and executed by 2 people who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle between them and my money. The irony wasn't lost on me. For months I had been paralyzed by the fear of losing Charlotte, terrified of the loneliness that divorce would bring. I had been willing to forgive almost anything to save our marriage. But listening to her casual cruelty, her complete lack of remorse or affection, I realized that I had been mourning something that had never really existed. The Charlotte I had loved was a fiction, a character she had played to gain access to my resources. The real Charlotte was standing on my porch, encouraging her lover to break into my home so they could steal everything I had worked for. Derek's crowbar struck the door again, and this time I heard the unmistakable sound of metal biting deep into wood. The door frame was failing. In a few more minutes they would be inside my home, taking everything that mattered to me. But as I stood in my hallway, surrounded by 28 years of memories that had all turned out to be lies, I felt something unexpected: relief. The woman I had been trying so desperately to save had just shown me exactly who she really was. And for the first time in months, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I walked to my office and picked up my phone. But instead of calling the police, I dialed a different number, one I hadn't called in far too long. "Marcus," I said when my brother answered, "I need your help." The phone call to Marcus lasted less than 60 seconds. My younger brother had always been a man of few words, especially since his military days. When I told him what was happening, there was a long pause, then simply, "I'm 20 minutes away. Don't open that door until I get there. 20 minutes. I looked at my splintering doorframe and wondered if it would last that long. Derek's crowbar was making steady progress, each strike sending wood chips flying onto my hardwood floor. The sound had become almost rhythmic, like some twisted percussion section announcing the end of my old life. "Almost got it," Derek called out triumphantly. "This old door is tougher than I thought, but nothing I can't handle." Charlotte's voice was breathless with excitement. "I can't wait to get inside. Joseph's probably hiding in there like a scared little mouse. He was always such a coward when confronted with real conflict." A coward. After 28 years of marriage, that's how she saw me. Not as a man who had worked himself to exhaustion, building a business that supported her lifestyle. Not as a husband who had prioritized her happiness above his own countless times. Just a coward. Maybe she was right. Maybe I had been a coward for staying silent when she criticized everything I did. Maybe I had been a coward for pretending not to notice when she started coming home at midnight smelling like another man's cologne. Maybe I had been a coward for hoping our marriage could be saved even after discovering her betrayal. But I wasn't feeling like a coward anymore. I walked to my office and opened the safe behind the lighthouse painting, the same safe Charlotte had just described in detail to her lover. Inside, along with all my important documents, was something I hadn't touched in 15 years. My father's service revolver. He had carried it through 2 tours in Vietnam and had given it to me before he died, along with a simple piece of advice. "Some battles you can walk away from, son. Others you have to win." I checked the cylinder. Still loaded, just as I had left it. My father had taught me to always keep it ready, just in case. I had never imagined that "just in case" would involve my own wife and her lover attempting to rob me in broad daylight. The crowbar struck again, and this time I heard the distinctive sound of metal hitting metal. Derek had reached the deadbolt. It wouldn't be long now. "I think I've got it," he shouted. "Few more hits and we're in." I slipped the revolver into the waistband of my pants, covering it with my shirt. I wasn't planning to use it. I wasn't that kind of man. But having it there gave me a sense of control I hadn't felt in months. The minutes crawled by like hours. I found myself pacing between the kitchen and the living room, checking the time obsessively. 18 minutes since I had called Marcus. 17 minutes, 16. Through the window, I could see neighbors beginning to notice the commotion. Mrs. Henderson from across the street was standing on her porch, phone in hand. Mr. Peterson had come out of his garage and was watching the scene unfold. Part of me felt embarrassed that my private humiliation was becoming a neighborhood spectacle, but mostly I felt grateful that there were witnesses to whatever was about to happen. The crowbar struck again, and I heard a different sound, the metallic click of the deadbolt finally giving way. "Got it!" Derek yelled. "We're in." But as he spoke, I heard something else, the low rumble of a diesel engine coming down Maple Street at high speed. Through the front window, I caught sight of a black Chevy Silverado taking the corner fast enough to make the tires squeal. Marcus. The truck pulled into my driveway with a spray of gravel, coming to a stop just inches from Derek's bumper. The driver's door opened and my brother stepped out. If Derek was intimidating, Marcus was terrifying. 6 feet 4 inches of solid muscle with arms like tree trunks and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He had been a drill sergeant for 12 years before retiring from the Army, and he still carried himself like a man who expected immediate obedience from everyone around him. But Marcus hadn't come alone. 2 more vehicles pulled into my driveway in quick succession. The first was a silver BMW driven by a man in an expensive suit who could only be a lawyer. The second was a nondescript sedan that disgorged a woman with a camera and a man carrying what looked like recording equipment. Charlotte and Derek stood frozen on my porch, Derek still holding his crowbar, both of them staring at the small army that had just assembled in my front yard. Marcus walked slowly toward the house, his boots crunching on the gravel. When he spoke, his voice carried the kind of authority that made grown men snap to attention. Derek Molina, age 37, currently employed at Gold's Gym on Riverside Drive. Marcus read from a small notebook as he walked. Divorced from Linda Molina in 2000 and 21 due to infidelity. Currently 3 months behind on child support payments totaling $2,400. Has outstanding warrants for unpaid traffic violations in 2 counties. Derek's face went white. Who the hell are you? Charlotte Elaine Mitchell, née Williams, Marcus continued, ignoring Derek's question. Born April 15, 1972. Currently unemployed but receiving monthly stipend of $3,500 from spouse. Has been systematically transferring money from joint accounts to personal accounts since October of 2022. Total amount diverted, $75,837. Charlotte's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Who gave you that information? I walked to the front door, my hand resting on the revolver in my waistband. Through the damaged wood, I could hear everything clearly. Marcus smiled, but it wasn't a friendly expression. My name is Marcus Mitchell, and I'm a licensed private investigator. This is Robert Thompson from Thompson & Associates, and these are Jennifer and Paul from Diamond Investigations. We've been documenting your activities for the past 6 weeks. 6 weeks? I felt a surge of gratitude toward my brother, so powerful it almost knocked me over. While I had been wallowing in self-pity and trying to figure out how to save my marriage, Marcus had been quietly building a case against the people who were trying to destroy me. The man in the expensive suit, Robert Thompson, stepped forward and handed Derek an official-looking document. Mr. Molina, this is a restraining order preventing you from coming within 500 feet of this property or Joseph Mitchell. Violation of this order is a felony. Derek stared at the paper like it was written in a foreign language. This is bullshit. Charlotte has every right to be here. Actually, Thompson replied smoothly, she doesn't. Mrs. Mitchell was served with divorce papers yesterday morning at her sister's house, where she has been living since January 15th. As of noon yesterday, she has no legal claim to this property. Yesterday morning. While I had been sitting in my house feeling sorry for myself, my legal team had been taking action. I hadn't even known I had a legal team. Charlotte found her voice, though it was higher and shriller than usual. Joseph, come out here and tell them this is all a mistake. I took a deep breath and opened what was left of my front door. The cool January air hit my face like a slap, but it felt refreshing after being trapped inside for so long. Derek raised his crowbar when he saw me, but Marcus was beside him in 2 quick strides. Without any visible effort, he twisted the tool out of Derek's hands and tossed it aside. It clattered on the concrete like scrap metal. Assault with a deadly weapon, Marcus noted calmly. Jennifer, did you get that on camera? The woman with the camera nodded. Every second of it. I looked at Charlotte, really looked at her for the first time in months. She was still beautiful, 52 years old but looking closer to 40 thanks to all those spa treatments I had paid for. But there was something in her eyes I had never seen before. Genuine fear. Joseph, she said, her voice suddenly small and pleading, honey, we can work this out. We don't need lawyers and investigators. This is between us. No, Charlotte, I replied, surprised by how steady my own voice sounded. This stopped being between us the moment you decided to steal my money and break into my house. Thompson stepped forward with another set of documents. Mrs. Mitchell, you're being served with a civil suit for theft, fraud, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The state of Texas takes a very dim view of spouses who systematically loot joint assets while planning to abandon their marriage. Charlotte's face crumpled. I never meant for it to go this far. I just wanted to be happy. You wanted to be happy with my money, I corrected. There's a difference. Derek, perhaps sensing that the situation had spun completely out of his control, tried to back away toward his truck. Marcus stepped into his path. Where do you think you're going, Mr. Molina? Look, man, I didn't know she was married when we started dating. She told me she was divorced. The lie was so blatant, so easily disproven that even Charlotte looked shocked. Derek, that's not true. I told you everything about my situation. Did you? Derek's voice turned nasty. Did you tell me about the private investigators? Did you tell me about the restraining orders? Because if you had, I sure as hell wouldn't be standing here with my ass hanging in the wind. And just like that, the partnership between Charlotte and Derek began to crumble. Under pressure, their mutual loyalty evaporated like morning dew. Marcus pulled out his phone and dialed a number. This is Mitchell. We need a patrol unit at 62 Maple Street for attempted burglary and assault with a deadly weapon. Yes, we have everything documented. 2 suspects, 1 male, 1 female. As I listened to my brother coordinate with the police, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the sensation of being protected. For so long I had been the protector of Charlotte, of our marriage, of the illusion that everything was fine. But now, for the first time in decades, someone was protecting me. The sound of sirens in the distance grew louder, and Charlotte's composure finally shattered completely. "Joseph, please, don't let them arrest me. I'm your wife." I looked at her one more time, this woman who had shared my bed and my life for 28 years, and felt nothing but pity. "No, Charlotte," I said quietly. "You're just someone I used to know." The police arrived within minutes, their red and blue lights painting my quiet neighborhood in alternating colors of authority. I watched through my damaged doorway as Officer Martinez stepped out of the first patrol car, his expression serious but not surprised. Apparently, domestic calls involving property destruction weren't unusual for him. Marcus approached the officer with the easy confidence of someone who had dealt with law enforcement many times before. They spoke quietly for several minutes while Jennifer continued filming and Paul adjusted his recording equipment. Charlotte and Derek stood awkwardly on my porch, both of them looking like they wanted to run but knowing they had nowhere to go. "Mr. Mitchell?" Officer Martinez walked toward me, his hand resting casually on his equipment belt. "I understand there's been an attempted break-in?" "That's correct." I gestured toward the splintered doorframe. "My estranged wife and her boyfriend used a crowbar to try to force entry into my home." Derek stepped forward, his chest puffed out in a display of false confidence. "Now wait just a minute. Charlotte has every right to enter her own house. This guy changed the locks illegally." Officer Martinez looked at Derek with the weary expression of a man who had heard every possible excuse. "And you are?" "Derek Molina? I'm Charlotte's friend." "Her friend." Martinez made a note in his pad. "And what's your role in this property dispute between husband and wife?" "I'm here to protect her rights," Derek replied, though his voice had lost some of its earlier bravado. Thompson stepped forward with his briefcase. "Officer Martinez, I'm Robert Thompson, Mr. Mitchell's attorney. I have documentation that might clarify the legal situation here." As Thompson spread papers across the hood of the patrol car, Marcus approached me with his own folder, a thick manila envelope that looked ominous in the morning light. "Joseph," he said quietly, "there are things you need to see, things I discovered during my investigation that go beyond just the money." I felt my stomach tighten. "What kind of things?" Instead of answering, Marcus opened the folder and handed me a stack of photographs. The first few showed Charlotte and Derek at various restaurants and hotels, clearly intimate and clearly not trying to hide their relationship. But as I continued through the stack, the images became more disturbing. Charlotte at a bank speaking with a loan officer, Charlotte at a real estate office looking at property listings, Charlotte at a lawyer's office that definitely wasn't Thompson's firm. "She wasn't just stealing money," Marcus explained. "She was planning to disappear with it." He handed me another document, a rental agreement for a house in Cancun, Mexico. The lease was for 1 year, starting February 1st, just 2 weeks away. The monthly rent was $4,000, and the document was signed by both Charlotte and Derek. "They were going to take your money and leave the country," Marcus continued. "Derek has family in Mexico. They could have disappeared for years before anyone found them." I stared at the rental agreement, my hands shaking. Not only had Charlotte been betraying me emotionally and financially, she had been planning to vanish from my life completely, taking everything I owned and leaving me with nothing. Officer Martinez finished reviewing Thompson's documents and walked back toward us, his expression grim. "Mrs. Mitchell, you need to understand that changing locks on marital property is not illegal when divorce proceedings have been initiated. You have no legal right to force entry into this home." Charlotte's face flushed red. "Divorce proceedings? Joseph, what is he talking about?" Thompson opened his briefcase and pulled out yet another set of papers. "Mrs. Mitchell, You were served with divorce papers yesterday morning. According to my records, you signed for the certified mail at 9:43 a.m. I never opened that envelope, Charlotte protested. I thought it was junk mail. Ignorance of legal documents doesn't negate their validity, Thompson replied smoothly. As of yesterday, you have no claim to this property. Your attempted entry this morning constitutes breaking and entering. Derek, who had been growing more agitated by the minute, suddenly exploded. This is all bullshit. Charlotte told me her husband was some weak old man who wouldn't fight back. She said we could take whatever we wanted. The admission hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Even Charlotte looked stunned by Derek's casual betrayal of their conspiracy. Marcus smiled grimly and gestured toward Jennifer, who was still filming everything. Thank you for that confession, Mr. Molina. That should make the prosecutor's job much easier. Derek's face went white as he realized what he had just done. I want a lawyer. That's your right, Officer Martinez replied, but first we need to discuss the charges you're facing. As Martinez began explaining Derek's legal situation, Marcus pulled me aside again. Joseph, there's more. Things that are going to be hard to hear. He handed me another photograph. This one showed Charlotte at what appeared to be a medical clinic, holding hands with a woman I didn't recognize. Her sister? I asked. No. Marcus's voice was gentle but firm. That's Dr. Sarah Hendricks. She's a psychiatrist who specializes in what they call divorce strategy counseling. I frowned. What's that supposed to mean? It means Charlotte has been planning this divorce for over a year, Marcus explained. Dr. Hendricks helps women maximize their settlements by documenting emotional abuse, financial manipulation, and psychological trauma. Charlotte was building a case to take everything you own. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Emotional abuse, financial manipulation. I gave her everything she wanted. That's not how she was going to present it in court, Marcus continued. According to Dr. Hendricks's notes, which I'd obtained through a private investigator's sources, Charlotte was claiming that you were controlling, emotionally distant, and financially abusive. She was going to argue that her affair was a result of your neglect and that she deserved significant compensation for years of psychological damage. I felt sick. While I had been agonizing over how to save our marriage, Charlotte had been systematically building a case to destroy me. Every conversation, every argument, every moment of tension had been potential ammunition for her legal assault. There's more, Marcus said, handing me another document. She took out a life insurance policy on you 6 months ago, $500,000 with herself as the sole beneficiary. The implications hit me like a physical blow. She was planning. I don't know what she was planning, Marcus interrupted. But the timing is suspicious. Most people don't increase their spouse's life insurance while planning a divorce unless they have a specific reason. I looked across the yard at Charlotte, who was now crying openly as Officer Martinez explained her legal situation. This woman, who I had loved and trusted for nearly 3 decades, had been systematically planning my financial and possibly physical destruction. Thompson approached us with another set of documents. Joseph, I need you to look at these bank records. We've traced the money Charlotte stole, and the pattern is more complex than we initially thought. The bank statements showed a series of transfers that began 18 months ago, long before I had suspected anything was wrong. Small amounts at first, just a few $100s here and there, then larger sums, always timed to coincide with business payments that would mask their absence. But the most damaging evidence was a series of emails between Charlotte and Derek that my investigative team had recovered from her phone. In them, she detailed my daily routines, my business schedule, and even my health issues. She had been feeding Derek information about my life, my vulnerabilities, and my assets. One email, dated just 3 weeks ago, made my blood run cold. Joseph's been having chest pains again but won't see a doctor. His pride won't let him admit he's getting old. If something were to happen to him, the life insurance would take care of everything. We wouldn't have to worry about the divorce at all. I read the email 3 times, each reading making me more nauseated than the last. Charlotte wasn't just planning to leave me. She was hoping I would die. Marcus placed a hand on my shoulder. Joseph, I know this is overwhelming, but you need to understand the full scope of what we're dealing with. Charlotte and Derek weren't just having an affair. They were planning a complex financial crime, and possibly worse. Officer Martinez walked back toward us, his expression grave. Mr. Mitchell, based on the evidence your attorney has provided, I'm placing Mrs. Mitchell under arrest for theft, fraud, and conspiracy to commit burglary. Mr. Molina is being charged with attempted burglary, assault with a deadly weapon, and conspiracy. Charlotte's sobs became hysterical as Martinez approached her with handcuffs. Joseph, please, don't let them arrest me. I'm sorry, I made mistakes, but I still love you. Still love me. After everything I had learned in the past hour, those words felt like another knife in my chest. Derek, meanwhile, had completely abandoned any pretense of loyalty to Charlotte. Officer, I want to make a deal. I can tell you everything about her plans. She's been manipulating me just like she manipulated her husband. The betrayal was swift and complete. Under pressure, their partnership had dissolved into mutual accusations and desperate self-preservation. As I watched the woman I had married being placed in handcuffs, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Sadness for the loss of what I had thought was love. Anger at the depth of her deception. But underneath it all, something unexpected. Relief. For months I had been torturing myself with questions about what I had done wrong, how I had failed as a husband, why I hadn't been enough for Charlotte. Now I knew the truth. I hadn't failed, I had been targeted. Charlotte hadn't left me for love, she had been running a long-term con. Thompson approached me with a final document. Joseph, this is an emergency restraining order preventing Charlotte from accessing any of your assets or properties. It also freezes her bank accounts pending the outcome of the criminal investigation. I signed the papers with a steady hand, watching as the patrol cars pulled away with Charlotte and Derek in custody. The neighborhood gradually returned to normal, though I could see curtains twitching in several windows as my neighbors tried to process what they had witnessed. Marcus put his arm around my shoulders as we watched the cars disappear down Maple Street. It's over, Joseph, he said quietly. The worst part is over. I looked at my damaged front door, at the wood chips scattered across my porch, at the evidence of violence that would need to be repaired. But for the first time in months, I felt something approaching peace. No, I replied, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. It's not over, it's just beginning. The phone call came at 2 in the afternoon, just as I was meeting with a contractor about repairing my front door. The number was blocked, but something told me I should answer it. Joseph? Charlotte's voice was barely above a whisper, strained and desperate. Joseph, please, I need to talk to you. I excused myself from the contractor and walked into my office. Charlotte, you're not supposed to contact me. The restraining order. I'm allowed one phone call for legal matters, she interrupted. Joseph, you have to listen to me. Derek lied to you about everything. Despite myself, I felt a flicker of curiosity. What do you mean? He told the police things that aren't true. He's trying to make it look like everything was my idea, like I forced him to help me. But Joseph, that's not what happened. I sat down heavily in my grandfather's chair. Then tell me what did happen. There was a long pause, filled only by the sound of Charlotte's ragged breathing. When she spoke again, her voice was different, smaller, more vulnerable than I had heard it in years. Derek approached me at the gym 18 months ago, not the other way around. He said he could tell I was unhappy, that I deserved better than what I had. He was so charming, so attentive. He made me feel special in a way I hadn't felt in years. I closed my eyes, remembering how Charlotte had suddenly become interested in fitness, how she had started spending hours at the gym every day. At first it was just emotional, she continued. Someone to talk to, someone who listened to my problems, but then Derek started asking questions about you, about our finances, about our marriage. He said he was just trying to understand my situation, but now I realize he was gathering information. Information for what? For this, her voice broke. Joseph, Derek has done this before. The police told me today there are 3 other women in the past 5 years. Women with wealthy husbands. Women he seduced and convinced to help him steal money. The revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. You're telling me you were just another Mark? Charlotte sobbed openly now. I thought he loved me. I thought he wanted to build a life with me. But when the police arrested us, when everything fell apart, he threw me away like garbage. He told them I was the mastermind, that I threatened him if he didn't help me. Joseph, I've never threatened anyone in my life. I found myself believing her, not because I wanted to, but because it matched what I had observed about Derek's character. He was a predator who targeted vulnerable women, and Charlotte, despite all her faults, had been vulnerable in her own way. What about the money you stole? I asked. $75,000 doesn't just disappear by accident. Derek said it was for our future together, Charlotte replied miserably. He said we needed to build a nest egg so we could start fresh somewhere else. He told me it wasn't really stealing because half of everything was mine anyway, as your wife. I believed him because I wanted to believe him. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache building. And the house in Mexico? The life insurance policy? The house was Derek's idea. He said Mexico was beautiful, that we could live like royalty there on American money. As for the insurance, she trailed off. As for the insurance, Derek said it was just smart financial planning. He said most couples our age had larger policies than we did. I never thought about what it meant until today when my lawyer explained what the police think we were planning. The implications were clear. Derek hadn't just been planning to steal my money, he had been planning to collect on my life insurance policy. Charlotte may have been his accomplice, but she had also been his unwitting tool. Charlotte, I said carefully, did Derek ever suggest ways that something might happen to me? Any accidents or health scares? The silence stretched so long I thought she had hung up. Finally she whispered, "He used to joke about your chest pains. He said stress was a killer for men your age, that I should stop nagging you about things because the pressure might give you a heart attack. He said it like he was being protective. But now we both understood what Derek had really been suggesting. Joseph, I know I've made terrible mistakes. I know I've hurt you in ways that can never be forgiven. But I need you to know that I never wanted you to be hurt physically. Whatever Derek was planning, I was too blind to see it." I believed her, though it didn't change anything between us. Charlotte had been foolish, selfish, and cruel, but she hadn't been a would-be murderer. Derek, on the other hand, was something much more dangerous. "What do you want from me, Charlotte?" "I want to make this right," she said urgently. "I want to testify against Derek to tell the police everything I know about his operation, but my lawyer says I'll need cooperation from you to make a deal with the prosecutor." "What kind of cooperation?" "A statement saying that you believe I was manipulated, that Derek was the real mastermind. In exchange, I'll plead guilty to the theft charges and agree to pay back every penny I took, plus interest." I considered her offer. Part of me wanted to see Charlotte punished to the full extent of the law for what she had done to our marriage and my trust. But another part of me, the part that had once loved her, felt something approaching pity. "I'll think about it," I told her. "Joseph, there's something else. Derek made bail this morning. His family posted $50,000 to get him out." My blood ran cold. "He's out of jail?" His lawyer argued that he was a low flight risk because of his job and his ties to the community. "But Joseph, you don't know Derek like I do now. He blames you for ruining his plan. He's not just angry, he's dangerous." I walked to my office window and looked out at the quiet suburban street. Everything looked normal, peaceful, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. "Have you told the police about this?" "They say there's nothing they can do unless he violates the restraining order. But Joseph, a piece of paper isn't going to stop Derek if he decides he has nothing left to lose." After I hung up, I called Marcus immediately. He arrived within 30 minutes bringing 2 other men I didn't recognize. Both looked like they had military or law enforcement backgrounds. "Derek posted bail," I told Marcus as soon as he walked in. "I know." Marcus's expression was grim. I've been monitoring the situation. That's why I brought backup. He gestured toward the two men. This is Ray and Tommy. They work for my security company. They're going to be staying here until Derek is back in custody. You think Charlotte was right about him being dangerous? Marcus nodded. I've been digging deeper into Derek's background. The pattern with previous victims is always the same: seduction, theft, and when things go wrong, violence. 2 of his previous marks ended up in the hospital with suspicious accidents. Accidents? Car brake failure, a fall down a flight of stairs, nothing that could be definitively proved, but the pattern is there. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the January weather. So what do we do? We wait, Marcus replied, and we stay alert. Derek thinks he's smart, but he's also desperate now. Desperate men make mistakes. The call came at 11 that night. I was in my living room trying to read, but mostly just listening to every sound the old house made when my phone buzzed. The number was Derek's. You ruined everything. His voice was slurred with alcohol and rage. I had it all planned out, everything was perfect, and you had to go and play detective. Derek, you need to hang up, I said calmly, though my heart was pounding. You're violating the restraining order. Fuck the restraining order, he screamed. You think some piece of paper is going to protect you? You think your brother and his soldier boys are going to be there every minute of every day? I could hear him breathing heavily, could almost picture him pacing and working himself into a fury. I could have been set for life, he continued. Charlotte was the perfect mark. Rich husband, unhappy marriage, desperate for attention. All I had to do was wait for you to have your little heart attack and boom, $500,000, no questions asked. But that didn't work out for you, did it? No, it didn't work out. Derek's voice rose to a shout. Because you had to go and get suspicious. You had to start asking questions. You had to ruin everything. Derek, whatever you're thinking of doing. I'm not thinking anymore, he interrupted. I'm done thinking. I'm done planning. I'm done being careful. You want to play hardball? Fine, let's play hardball. The line went dead. I immediately called Marcus, who was staying in the guest room upstairs. He was in my living room within seconds, fully dressed and alert. He just called, I told him. He's drunk and angry and making threats. Marcus nodded grimly and pulled out his own phone. Ray, Tommy, we have a situation. Derek just called Joseph with direct threats. I know, stay alert. He hung up and turned to me. Ray's in the house across the street, Tommy's in the backyard. If Derek shows up tonight, we'll be ready. What if he doesn't show up tonight? What if he waits? Marcus smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. Then he'll be waiting for nothing. Because tomorrow morning the prosecutor is filing additional charges against him. Stalking, terrorist threats, and violation of a protective order. This phone call just bought Derek another 5 years in prison. I stared at my brother. You recorded the call? I've been recording all your calls since this morning. Everything Derek just said is going straight to the district attorney's office first thing tomorrow. For the first time in hours, I felt myself relax slightly. Derek thought he was hunting me, but in reality, he had just walked into a trap. Marcus, I said, remind me never to get on your bad side. He chuckled. Trust me, little brother, after 28 years of watching Charlotte walk all over you, I'm just getting started. Derek picked the wrong family to mess with. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows of my old house. Somewhere in the darkness, Derek was probably plotting his next move, convinced that he could still salvage his failed scheme. But he didn't know what I was beginning to understand. That sometimes the best defense isn't running or hiding. Sometimes it's standing your ground and letting your enemies destroy themselves. 6 months later, I stood in my kitchen making coffee for 2, a habit I had thought I would never enjoy again. The morning light streamed through windows that no longer felt like prison bars, illuminating a space that had been transformed from a monument to broken promises into something that finally felt like home. The legal proceedings had concluded 3 weeks ago. Charlotte pled guilty to theft and fraud charges, receiving 2 years of probation and an order to repay the $75,837 she had stolen, plus interest. Her cooperation in the case against Derek had been valuable enough to keep her out of prison, though she would be working at a department store for years to come to meet her restitution obligations. Derek hadn't been so fortunate. The additional charges from his threatening phone call, combined with evidence of his pattern of victimizing other women, had earned him a sentence of 12 years in federal prison. His parole officer had informed me that Derek would likely serve at least 8 years before becoming eligible for release. But the real transformation hadn't happened in the courtroom. It had happened right here, in this house that had once felt like a mausoleum of memories. "Good morning," Elena said as she padded into the kitchen in her slippers, her gray hair still tousled from sleep. At 62, she was 6 years older than me, a widow who had lost her husband to cancer 3 years earlier. We had met at a grief counseling group that Marcus had insisted I attend, though my grief hadn't been for a death, but for the death of an illusion. "Coffee's almost ready," I replied, wrapping my arms around her from behind as she looked out at the garden. "The roses are coming along nicely." Elena had helped me redesign the garden completely, removing the elaborate rose bushes that Charlotte had insisted on and replacing them with simple, hardy perennials that required less maintenance but provided more genuine beauty. It was a perfect metaphor for how I was rebuilding my life. Less pretentious, more authentic. "Joseph," Elena said softly, leaning back against my chest, "are you happy?" It was a question she asked me regularly, not out of insecurity but from genuine concern. Elena understood that healing from betrayal was a process, not an event. "I am," I replied, and for the first time in years, I meant it completely. The doorbell rang, and I knew without looking that it would be Marcus. He had made it a habit to stop by every few weeks, ostensibly to check on security matters, but really to make sure I was adjusting well to my new life. "Morning, Joseph. Elena." Marcus accepted a cup of coffee and settled into his usual chair at the kitchen table. "Thought you'd want to know. Derek was transferred to federal prison in Colorado yesterday." I nodded, feeling neither satisfaction nor regret. Derek was no longer my concern. "And Charlotte?" "Started her new job at Macy's last week. Department store sales associate, $8.50 an hour. It'll take her about 15 years to pay back what she owes you." Elena squeezed my hand. "Do you feel sorry for her?" I considered the question carefully. "I feel sorry for the woman I thought I married," I said finally. "But that woman never really existed. The real Charlotte made her choices, and now she's living with the consequences." Marcus smiled approvingly. "That's the healthiest attitude I've heard from you in 30 years. After Marcus left, Elena and I took our morning walk through the neighborhood. The same neighbors who had witnessed my humiliation 6 months ago now greeted us warmly, and more than one had commented on how much better I looked. I had lost 20 pounds, started exercising regularly, and found a peace that had been missing from my life for years. "I have something to tell you," Elena said as we reached the corner where Maple Street intersected with Oak Avenue. I felt a familiar flutter of anxiety. In my experience, conversations that began with those words rarely ended well. Elena must have seen my expression because she laughed. "It's good news, Joseph. My daughter called last night. She wants to meet you." Elena's daughter lived in California with her own family. We had been dating for 4 months, but I hadn't met any of Elena's relatives yet. The fact that her daughter wanted to meet me felt significant. "What did you tell her about me?" "I told her that you're a good man who deserves to be happy," Elena replied simply. "I told her that you treat me with respect and kindness and that I'm grateful every day that I found you. Found me. Not saved me. Not rescued me. Not fixed me. Found me." It was a distinction that mattered more than Elena probably realized. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in months. I drove past my old office building. The consulting business I had built over 25 years was now in capable hands. Marcus had helped me find a management team to run the day-to-day operations while I served as a silent partner, collecting dividends but no longer tied to the 16-hour workdays that had consumed my life during my marriage. My phone rang as I sat in the parking lot, looking up at the building where I had spent so many years. The number was unlisted, but something prompted me to answer. "Joseph, it's Charlotte." I should have hung up immediately. The restraining order was still in effect and she wasn't supposed to contact me, but something in her voice, a quality I couldn't identify, made me stay on the line. "What do you want, Charlotte?" "I wanted to apologize," she said quietly. "I know it doesn't change anything, and I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I needed to say it." I waited, saying nothing. "I was watching you and Elena at the grocery store last week," she continued. "You looked happy, really happy, and I realized that I never made you look like that, not once in 28 years. The admission was so honest, so devoid of self-pity or manipulation, that it caught me off guard. Charlotte, you're violating the restraining order by calling me. I know this is the last time. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what Derek was doing to me, and I understand what I was doing to you. I was never a good wife to you, Joseph. You deserved better." She hung up before I could respond. I sat in my car for a long time, processing the conversation. For months I had fantasized about Charlotte calling to apologize, to admit her mistakes, to beg for forgiveness. Now that it had actually happened, I felt nothing but a kind of distant sadness, not for what we had lost, but for what we had never really had to begin with. That evening, Elena and I cooked dinner together, something Charlotte had never enjoyed doing. We talked about Elena's plans to visit her daughter, about a trip we were considering to Italy, about small, everyday things that somehow felt profound in their simplicity. "I got divorce papers in the mail today," I told her as we cleaned up after dinner. Elena nodded. "How do you feel about it?" "Free," I replied without hesitation. Later that night, as Elena slept beside me in what had once been the bed I shared with Charlotte, I found myself thinking about the journey that had brought me to this moment. 6 months ago, I had been a broken man, devastated by betrayal and convinced that my life was over. I had been ready to forgive almost anything to avoid being alone, but solitude, I had learned, was not the same thing as loneliness. In the months between Charlotte's arrest and meeting Elena, I had rediscovered parts of myself that had been buried for years. I had remembered what it felt like to make decisions based on my own preferences rather than someone else's demands. I had learned the difference between being needed and being used. Most importantly, I had learned that love, real love, wasn't about desperation or dependency. It was about two whole people choosing to build something together, not one person completing the other. My phone buzzed with a text message from Marcus. "Saw the news about your divorce being finalized. Congratulations, brother. Mom and Dad would be proud of who you've become." I smiled and turned off the phone. Outside, a gentle rain began to fall, the kind of soft spring rain that made everything green and new again. For the first time in decades, I fell asleep not worrying about tomorrow, not planning how to fix someone else's problems, not walking on eggshells to avoid conflict. I fell asleep simply content to be exactly who I was, exactly where I was, with someone who loved me, not for what I could provide, but for who I had chosen to become. The old Joseph, the one who had been willing to sacrifice his dignity for the illusion of love, was gone. The man who had emerged from that betrayal was stronger, wiser, and finally genuinely happy. 6 months later, Elena and I were married in a small ceremony in my backyard, surrounded by the perennial garden we had planted together. Marcus walked Elena down the aisle, and her daughter served as matron of honor. It was simple, honest, and perfect. As we exchanged vows under the same oak tree where Charlotte had once planned elaborate parties that were really performances, I felt a profound sense of completion. Not because I had found someone to complete me, but because I had finally learned to complete myself. The house on Maple Street still stood, but it was no longer a museum of broken dreams. It was a home where two people who had survived their own storms had chosen to weather whatever came next together. And for the first time in my 56 years, that was more than enough. It was everything.